An avoidant doesn't fear love itself. They fear what love reveals within them. Real love is a mirror, and for someone who's built their identity on independence and emotional control, that mirror is terrifying. When you get close enough to see past the mask, when your presence reaches a part of them that's never been touched before, it shakes their system. The avoidance instinct is to retreat. Not because you did something wrong, but because being loved without conditions exposes everything they've worked to hide: the wounds, the insecurities, the deep sense of unworthiness that whispers, "I'm not enough." So when authentic love enters, they panic. Their brain doesn't process connection as safety. It interprets it as danger. That's the paradox. The closer you get to their heart, the stronger their fear response becomes. They may start pulling away, going silent, or acting distant. But behind that withdrawal isn't indifference. It's emotional overload. It's like their nervous system is short, circuiting under the weight of something it doesn't know how to regulate. Imagine living your whole life believing closeness equals pain. Then suddenly, someone comes along who offers love without judgment, consistency without chaos, affection without strings. It's not soothing, it's disorienting. It feels too good to be safe, too stable to be real. That's why an avoidant will sometimes push away the very person who made them feel alive again. Their subconscious mind can't yet tell the difference between being vulnerable and being in danger. Authentic love forces the avoidant to confront an identity crisis. Because for them, self-protection has always been survival. They've built their strength on emotional distance, on the ability to withdraw before they get hurt. But now, they're faced with something that challenges that survival mechanism. Love begins to dissolve the armor. And to someone who's lived behind walls their entire life, that's not liberation, it's exposure. That's why their reactions can seem contradictory. One day, they might look deeply connected, engaged, present, even affectionate. The next, they retreat, acting cold or detached. That's not manipulation. It's the internal tug of war between their craving for love and their instinct for safety. The avoidance body remembers the pain of rejection, the disappointment of being unseen, the betrayal of trust. So when love comes too close, they run, not away from you, but back toward the illusion of control. But here's the truth: most people don't see that panic, that fear, that withdrawal. It's evidence of how deeply they feel. If you meant nothing, they'd stay emotionally flat, detached, unaffected. Indifference is calm. Love, for an avoidant, is chaos. You've stirred something real, and that reality terrifies them because it's new, it's raw, it's uncontrollable. And this is where your perception becomes power. You can't interpret their fear as rejection, it's revelation. Their distance is not a sign that love has failed, it's proof that love is working. It's reaching parts of them they didn't know existed. You've triggered not their avoidance, but their awakening. When an avoidant feels authentic love, they start breaking their own rules. They think about you when they promised themselves they wouldn't. They imagine your voice in moments of silence. They reread messages they never replied to. Love sneaks through the cracks in their armor, and even though they fight it, they can't forget the feeling, because authentic love doesn't just connect bodies, it rewires the soul. So if you've seen that fear, that resistance, that strange push and pull dynamic, understand what's truly happening. You've become the mirror that shows them what they've buried. You've awakened their humanity in a place they thought was numb. They're not rejecting you, they're confronting themselves. And that's one of the most powerful signs of all. Because when an avoidant starts to feel authentic love, it doesn't start with comfort. It starts with conflict. But that conflict means something is shifting. Something real is breaking through the walls. Something deep is remembering what connection is supposed to feel like. So don't chase their fear. Don't internalize their silence. Let the space become their teacher. Because real love, authentic love, doesn't need to beg for recognition. It reveals itself in the discomfort of transformation. And sometimes, the panic you see in them isn't the end of love. It's the beginning of it. Authentic love doesn't always arrive peacefully. Sometimes it begins with the sound of old walls cracking open. And that's how you know it's real. When an avoidant begins to feel authentic love, something profound happens inside them. Something most people completely misread. In the beginning, avoidance looks like rejection. It looks like emotional distance, silence, coldness. But underneath that surface, something much deeper is happening. When they start to genuinely care, their avoidance doesn't disappear, it evolves. It shifts from a means of escape to a form of preservation. Early on, an avoidant runs from connection because connection threatens their equilibrium. It disrupts their emotional order. But when they fall for someone deeply, they don't run because they don't care. They run because they finally do. The distance becomes less about avoidance and more about protection. Protection of a feeling so powerful that their system doesn't yet know how to sustain it. They're not trying to erase you. They're trying to contain you within the limits of what feels safe. See, for the avoidant, love feels like standing too close to the sun. It's warm, magnetic, life-giving, but it's also blinding. Their nervous system has been wired through years of subtle abandonment or emotional disconnection to equate closeness with danger. So even when love feels good, it also feels risky. That's why when they start to fall deeply, they begin to overthink everything. They replay conversations in their mind. They analyze their own words. They start questioning whether they're enough, whether they'll lose themselves, whether they'll get hurt. The irony is that the more they love you, the more afraid they become of breaking what they're finally beginning to value. Their silence isn't the absence of emotion. It's the weight of too much emotion. The avoidant doesn't freeze because they're empty. They freeze because their capacity to feel has exceeded their capacity to regulate. They might withdraw after an intimate moment or disappear after a deep conversation, and you'll be tempted to believe it meant nothing. But in their world, that withdrawal often means it meant everything. They felt something real. And for them, real has always been dangerous. So they retreat not to escape love, but to preserve it in the only way they know how, by giving it distance to survive. You see, when an avoidant experiences authentic love, they start protecting it the way someone protects something rare. They don't know how to nurture it openly, so they guard it quietly. That's why their love looks inconsistent. They come close, then back away. They give a piece of themselves, then shut down. It's not manipulation. It's survival disguised as control. This is where the dynamic gets psychologically fascinating. For someone securely attached, love expands their world. But for an avoidant, love threatens their autonomy. Their entire self-image is built around independence, emotional control, and self-sufficiency. When real love enters, it begins dismantling those pillars. Suddenly, they can't stop thinking about someone else. They can't control how much they care. They can't predict how that love will change them. So to preserve a sense of power, they retreat into familiar territory, solitude. But inside that solitude, they're not at peace. They're haunted by the very connection they're trying to manage. That's the paradox. They pull back not to destroy the bond, but to keep it intact in a way that doesn't destroy them. It's a distorted form of protection, because to the avoidant, distance equals safety. If they can just create enough space, maybe they can keep both love and control. But the truth is, you can't preserve love by containing it. You preserve it by allowing it to grow. And that's the lesson they slowly begin to learn. Over time, the avoidant starts to realize that no amount of distance can silence authentic connection. They find themselves drawn back, not out of guilt or loneliness, but because the bond feels alive. It's as if love itself keeps calling them back to the edge of their comfort zone, daring them to try again, to open a little more, to trust a little deeper. They begin to sense that real safety doesn't come from control. It comes from vulnerability. And that's the quiet transformation that starts happening inside them. The love they once ran from becomes the very force that teaches them emotional courage. What they once tried to preserve by hiding, they now begin to preserve by showing up. The relationship stops being a threat and starts becoming a mirror, reflecting not just who they fear they are, but who they have the potential to become. So when you see an avoidant withdraw after connection, don't mistake it for disinterest. That's love learning how to breathe through fear. That's a heart that's never been allowed to stay open for too long, trying to survive what feels like too much truth at once. Real love doesn't make an avoidant run to escape. It makes them run to preserve. But preservation is the seed of transformation. And when they realize love isn't meant to be protected from, but protected by, that's when everything changes. Authentic love doesn't chase them. It waits for them to realize that safety was never in the distance. It was in the connection all along. When an avoidant begins to feel authentic love, something subtle yet extraordinary starts to unfold, something you might not notice unless you look beyond the surface. You'll start to see them mirroring you. Not deliberately, not manipulatively, but instinctively. It's one of the most revealing signs that love has penetrated their defenses. Because for someone who's spent most of their life emotionally detached, mirroring isn't just imitation. It's intimacy in disguise. You see, the avoidant mind doesn't understand love in the same way others do. Love isn't comfort, it's curiosity. It's a deep, unconscious pull toward what feels emotionally foreign. When they begin to fall for you, their nervous system starts recalibrating. They begin absorbing your rhythm, your speech patterns, your tone, your expressions, even your energy. It's as if their system is saying, "This is what safety feels like. Let me learn it." They won't say that out loud, of course. Avoidants are masters of emotional control. But deep beneath their composure, their subconscious is working overtime. They begin to mirror the energy of the person they love, because that's their first step toward connection. And it's fascinating. This mirroring isn't about deception. It's about belonging. It's their way of saying, "I want to understand you," without ever having to admit it. Think about how profound that is. For someone who has always valued independence, who has feared dependency, to start subconsciously aligning with your emotional state means something powerful has shifted. The walls they built for safety are no longer their fortress. They're becoming their prison. And love is the first thing that makes them want to escape it. Psychologically, mirroring is the brain's way of building empathy. It's the nervous system synchronizing with another's. When they begin to match your emotional energy, it's not pretense. It's a physiological reflection of connection. They begin to feel what you feel. When you're calm, they're calm. When you pull back, They sense the absence like a vacuum. Their emotions start responding to yours even when they try to suppress it. That's how you know you're no longer just a person in their life. You've become part of their emotional ecosystem. Now, this is where it gets interesting. At first, they don't even realize it's happening. They might find themselves thinking like you, speaking like you, even adopting your mannerisms. It's subtle, small things. They send a message the way you would. They use your phrasing. They respond to stress the way you do. It's not mimicry, it's resonance. They're tuning into you like a radio trying to find the right frequency. And the reason that's so significant is because avoidants don't mirror everyone. In fact, they spend most of their lives avoiding emotional resonance altogether. They keep people at arm's length to prevent any influence over their internal world. So when they start mirroring someone, it means that person has reached a depth in them that few ever do. They've breached the emotional firewall. This mirroring also reveals a deeper truth about love itself. It's contagious. Emotional energy transfers. And when love is authentic, it doesn't demand. It invites. It doesn't chase. It radiates. You become the emotional anchor that teaches them how to feel safe without withdrawing. Your stability regulates their chaos. Your calm disarms their fear. But here's where many people get it wrong. When they notice an avoidant mirroring them, they assume control. They think they're being imitated or manipulated. No. What's really happening is that the avoidant is learning connection through you. They're beginning to internalize the emotional patterns they never had modeled for them. You're not controlling them. You're awakening them. And as that mirroring deepens, you'll notice something even more beautiful. The dynamic shifts. They start mirroring not just your surface behaviors, but your emotional courage. They start opening up little by little. They begin to initiate contact, share more about themselves, respond with empathy instead of withdrawal. It's as if your emotional energy gave them permission to explore a new part of themselves, a part that's been dormant but waiting. That's the moment when you realize love isn't just a feeling, it's an education. It teaches both people how to speak a language that words can't translate. For the avoidant, mirroring becomes their first vocabulary in that language. It's the unspoken, I feel what you feel, that marks the beginning of genuine intimacy. So when you see those moments, the subtle imitation, the energetic reflection, the emotional sensing, don't overlook them. That's not coincidence. That's connection. It's love speaking through behavior when words are still too dangerous to use. Because when an avoidant begins to mirror you, it's not about control. It's about surrender. It means their emotional armor is softening, their body is beginning to trust, and their heart, though still quiet, is starting to echo yours. When you become the calm they unconsciously mirror, you're not just loved, you're trusted. And for an avoidant, trust is the loudest. I love you, they'll ever say without words. When an avoidant begins to feel authentic love, something inside them shifts from curiosity to crisis. What once felt like control begins to feel like chaos. This is the moment when their fear of losing you becomes existential, not just emotional. Because now it's not about losing a person. It's about losing the one experience that finally made them feel alive. You have to understand something about the avoidant psyche. Detachment has always been their shield. It's how they survive. They tell themselves they don't need anyone, that solitude is power, that feelings only complicate things. But authentic love exposes that illusion. It touches the part of them that craves connection more than control. And that's when the panic sets in. Because suddenly, They realize that if you walk away, you're not just leaving their life, you're taking the mirror that reflects their humanity. See, for most people, losing love hurts. For an avoidant, losing authentic love threatens their entire sense of self. It's not just heartbreak, it's identity collapse. Because the person who made them feel seen becomes the proof that they were never truly unreachable. You didn't just connect with them, you decoded them. And when someone sees through the armor stops working. That's why they can't get you out of their mind, even when they're silent. That's why they replay moments over and over. They're not just reminiscing. They're trying to make sense of something that broke every rule they've lived by. You became the contradiction they can't resolve. The person who got close enough to touch their fear and didn't run from it. The one who showed them that intimacy doesn't have to mean entrapment. This realization terrifies them because it exposes the truth they've avoided all their life. Their detachment was never strength. It was protection from pain. And once they've experienced genuine connection, that protection starts to feel like suffocation. That's why avoidants often spiral after losing someone they loved authentically. Outwardly, they look composed, indifferent, even cold. But internally, they're unraveling. Their sense of order collapses because now they know what emotional safety feels like, and they can't unlearn it. The fear of losing you becomes so powerful because it forces them to confront what love really means. Love isn't a transaction. It's not a game of control. It's an emotional ecosystem, fragile, unpredictable, alive. And for the first time, they're part of it. But love requires something they've never fully given before: surrender. And surrender feels like death to someone who's lived on self-preservation. You might wonder, if they love so deeply, why don't they just say it? Why not just hold on tighter instead of pulling away? The truth is, the closer they feel to you, the more exposed they feel to loss. And that exposure threatens everything they've built to survive. So they do what they've always done. They retreat. But now that retreat feels hollow. The solitude that once felt safe now feels empty. They crave the connection they once feared. That's the paradox of the avoidant heart. Love turns their fortress into a cage. What once protected them now isolates them from the very thing they need. And here's where the transformation begins. When they finally realize that no amount of control can replace the peace they felt when they allowed themselves to love freely. That's the awakening moment. When the fear of losing control finally loses its power to the deeper fear of losing you. You see, love forces evolution. It dismantles the parts of us that cling to safety at the expense of truth. And for the avoidant, the thought of losing someone who touched their soul becomes the catalyst for self-awareness.